I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who would sell her children's house out from under them. Then again, I never imagined my children would drive me to Pinecrest Assisted Living on a Tuesday afternoon, drop me off with a single suitcase, and fly to Sunnyside Beach for a 2-week family vacation, without so much as a backward glance. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. But that's exactly what happened to me, Martha Wilson, at 68 years old, with a sound mind and a broken heart. The look on Michael's face when he returned from vacation to find strangers living in his house, in the house that had been in our family for 4 decades, the house where I'd raised him, almost made the whole ordeal worthwhile. Almost. But this isn't a story about revenge. It's about what happens when you finally realize that the people who should value you the most have reduced you to an inconvenience. It's about finding yourself again when your identity has been stripped away. It's about rebuilding when everything you thought was certain turns to sand. It was early May when I first noticed the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered the room. My sons, Michael and Andrew, had been visiting more frequently than usual, bringing their wives and children for Sunday dinners at the house their father and I had bought when they were just boys. The house Howard and I had planned to grow old in together, before pancreatic cancer took him 5 years earlier. At first, I was delighted by the attention. After Howard died, the visits had become less frequent, phone calls shorter, invitations to grandchildren's events often last minute, or forgotten entirely. I'd tried not to take it personally. Everyone was busy with their own lives. I kept myself active with my garden club, volunteering at the library, and my weekly bridge games with friends. I didn't want to be one of those clingy widows who couldn't function without their children's constant attention. So when Michael suggested they all come for dinner that Sunday, I spent 2 days preparing. I made Howard's famous pot roast recipe, the one the boys had always loved, with carrots and potatoes that melted in your mouth. I baked 2 pies, apple for Michael and cherry for Andrew. I brought out the good china, the set Howard and I had, received as wedding gifts and only used on special occasions. "Mom, this all looks amazing," Lisa said as she helped me set the table. Her smile seemed strained around the edges, but I dismissed it as fatigue. With 4 children between them, my sons and their wives were always tired. Dinner was pleasant, if oddly formal. The grandchildren were on their best behavior, too well behaved, really. Tyler, at 17, barely looked up from his phone, but even he refrained from the eye-rolling that had become his standard response to anything adults said. 13-year-old Jacob, usually a tornado of energy, sat quietly pushing his food around his plate. Only 10-year-old Zoe seemed herself, chattering about her upcoming dance recital. It wasn't until after dessert, when the children had been sent outside to play, even Tyler, who protested that he was too old for playing, that Michael cleared his throat in that way he did before making office presentations. "Mom," he began, exchanging glances with Andrew, "we've been talking and we think it's time to consider some changes." I looked between my sons, these men who had once been small enough to carry on my hip. "Changes?" I asked, setting down my coffee cup. "What kind of changes?" Andrew leaned forward, his expression earnest. "We're worried about you being alone in this big house. It's a lot to maintain." "I manage just fine," I said, a defensive edge creeping into my voice. "Mrs. Abernathy's son mows the lawn, and I have a cleaning service come once a month for the heavy work." "It's not just the house," Michael continued. "Since Dad died, we've noticed you've become more forgetful." My back stiffened. "Forgetful? What are you talking about?" Lisa and Diane exchanged looks across the table. "You forgot Tyler's basketball championship," Lisa said gently. "And last month, you left the stove on when you went to your bridge game." "Once," I protested. "I left it on once. And that was because Ellie called in a state about her daughter's divorce just as I was leaving. Anyone could have been distracted by that. Mom. Andrew's voice took on that patient tone I'd grown to hate, the one that made me feel like a child being explained to, "It's not just once. There have been several incidents. We're concerned." "We found a really nice place," Michael said, pulling a glossy brochure from his pocket and sliding it across the table. "Pinecrest Assisted Living. It's got beautiful grounds, activities every day, and nurses on staff 24/7. I stared at the brochure without touching it, feeling a cold dread spread through my chest. A nursing home? You think I need to be in a nursing home? "It's not a nursing home, Mom," Lisa interjected. "It's an assisted living facility. There's a difference. You'd have your own apartment, but help would be right there if you needed it. And you wouldn't have to worry about cooking or cleaning," Diane added brightly, as if the prospect of giving up the daily tasks that structured my life was some sort of enticement. I looked around the table at their expectant faces and felt a surge of betrayal so profound it momentarily took my breath away. "I'm not going," I said flatly. "This is my home. Your father and I built our life here." Michael sighed, the sound heavy with disappointment. "We thought you might say that, but Mom, the truth is, you can't afford to stay here much longer." "What are you talking about? The mortgage is paid off. I have Howard's pension and my social security." "Property taxes have gone up," Andrew explained, "and the house needs a new roof. The foundation is showing cracks on the north side. The inspector—" "Inspector?" I interrupted. "You had the house inspected without telling me?" A guilty flush crept up Andrew's neck. "We were concerned about the safety issues. The point is, the repairs would cost almost as much as the house is worth, and your fixed income won't cover it." "And Pinecrest is an excellent facility," Michael pressed on. "We've toured it twice. They have an opening at the end of the month." I stood up so abruptly that my chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. "I think it's time for you all to go home," I said, my voice shaking with the effort to keep it steady. "I'm tired." "Mom," Michael began, but I cut him off. "I said I'm tired. We can discuss this another time." They left reluctantly, hugs stilted and uncomfortable, promises to call soon hanging in the air like unwanted perfume. After they drove away, I sat in Howard's old armchair in the darkening living room, the brochure for Pinecrest still on the dining table where I'd refused to touch it. "Can you believe this, Howard?" I whispered to the empty room. "Our boys think I'm losing my mind." But even as I sat there, indignation burning through my veins, a small voice of doubt crept in. Had I been forgetting things? There was the stove incident? Yes. And perhaps I had missed Tyler's championship, though I could have sworn no one had told me about it. And last week, I'd found my reading glasses in the refrigerator, which was admittedly odd. Still, everyone had moments like that. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. It didn't mean I needed to be shipped off to an institution, regardless of how they tried to dress it up with words like facility and community. The next morning, I called my doctor and made an appointment for a full physical and cognitive assessment. Dr. Patterson had been my physician for over 20 years. If anyone could give me an honest evaluation of my mental state, it would be her. The examination was thorough and, at times, embarrassing. Tests of memory and reasoning that seemed insultingly simple. Remember these 3 words: apple, penny, table. Drawing a clock face, counting backward from 100 by sevens. A week later, I sat in Dr. Patterson's office as she reviewed the results. "Physically, you're in excellent shape for a woman of your age, Martha," she said, looking over her, reading glasses at me. "Blood pressure, cholesterol, reflexes, all good. And cognitively, you're well within the normal range. You show no signs of dementia or significant cognitive decline." Relief washed over me. So I'm fine. You're experiencing some normal age-related memory changes, she clarified. Nothing pathological, nothing that would interfere with your ability to live independently. I clutched the printed assessment she handed me like it was a winning lottery ticket. My sons think I need to move to assisted living, I told her. They've already picked out a place. Dr. Patterson's expression softened. That's a family decision, Martha. But medically speaking, there's no reason you can't continue to live on your own, assuming your physical health remains stable. Armed with this vindication, I felt ready to confront Michael and Andrew. I invited them to dinner again, this time without their wives and children. I made a simple meal, soup and sandwiches, nothing that required hours of preparation. I wasn't trying to impress them. I was making a point. I waited until we'd finished eating before I placed Dr. Patterson's assessment on the table. I had a complete workup, I said. As you can see, I'm perfectly capable of living independently. Michael picked up the paper, scanning it with the focus he usually reserved for his quarterly business reports. Andrew read over his shoulder, frowning. This is good news, Mom, Andrew said finally. No one is saying you have dementia. But it doesn't change the financial reality, Michael added, setting the report down. The house still needs major repairs. Your fixed income still won't cover it. Then I'll get a part-time job, I said. The library is always looking for help. Michael shook his head. At your age? Mom, be realistic. I'm being perfectly realistic, I insisted. There are plenty of people my age and older who work. Besides, I could also take in a boarder. The guest room hasn't been used since you both moved out. A stranger in the house? Andrew looked horrified. That's not safe. It would be someone I vetted carefully. Maybe a graduate student or a young professional. My sons exchanged one of their looks, the kind that passed entire conversations between them without a word being spoken. It was Michael who finally spoke. We've already put down a deposit at Pinecrest, he said. Your name is on the waiting list. They expect an opening in the East Wing next month. I felt as if I'd been struck. You did what? Without my consent? It's refundable, Andrew said quickly. But Mom, we really think this is the best solution. The house can be sold to cover any gap in the cost of Pinecrest. You'd have your needs taken care of for the rest of your life. My needs, I repeated, my voice hollow. And what about my wants, my desires? Does it matter at all what I want? Of course it matters. Michael's tone was placating. But sometimes what we want isn't what's best for us. I stood up, gathering the dinner plates with hands that trembled slightly. I think you should go now. I need some time to think. They left reluctantly, Michael promising to call the next day, Andrew giving me a hug that felt more obligatory than affectionate. As I washed the dishes, tears slid down my cheeks and into the soapy water. I felt like a child being told what was good for me, my autonomy stripped away one reasoned argument at a time. That night, I couldn't sleep. I wandered through the house in my robe, touching familiar objects, remembering the life Howard and I had built here. The scratch on the banister from when Michael had dragged his science project upstairs. The slight dip in the living room floor, where Andrew had spilled a bottle of his fish tank chemicals during his marine biology phase. Every corner held a memory, a piece of our family's story. As dawn broke, I found myself in Howard's study, a room I rarely entered since his death. His desk remained as he'd left it, dust gathering on the surface. On impulse, I opened the middle drawer and pulled out the folder where he kept important documents. Inside, among the insurance policies and investment statements, was the deed to our house. I opened it with trembling fingers and froze when I saw what was written there. The house wasn't in my name alone, as I'd assumed. It was in all three of our names, mine, Michael's, and Andrew's. Howard must have changed it at some point without telling me, perhaps thinking he was securing my future by making sure our sons would inherit their share seamlessly. But what it meant now was devastating. I couldn't sell the house without my son's agreement. I couldn't take out a home equity loan to cover repairs. I was, effectively, at their mercy regarding the most significant asset I thought I owned. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I slumped in Howard's chair, the deed clutched in my hand, and for the first time since he died, I felt truly alone. The next few days passed in a fog of betrayal and grief. I went through the motions of my routine, watering plants, collecting mail, preparing simple meals I barely tasted. I ignored calls from Michael and Andrew, letting them go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to speak to them yet, not until I had processed this new reality. It was during this period of isolation that I received an unexpected visitor. Eleanor Garcia, my friend from Garden Club, knocked on my door on a Thursday afternoon, bearing a pot of her famous chicken soup and a concerned expression. "You missed Garden Club 2 weeks in a row," she said, bustling past me into the kitchen without waiting for an invitation. "That's not like you, Martha. I was worried." As she warmed the soup and set the table with the efficiency of a woman who had raised 6 children, I found myself telling her everything. The ambush dinner, the medical assessment, the discovery about the deed, all of it. Eleanor listened without interruption, her lined face growing increasingly grave. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Those boys of yours need a lesson in respect," she said firmly. "You're their mother, not a problem to be managed." "What can I do?" I asked her, hearing the defeat in my own voice. "The house is in their names, too. I can't stop them from selling it. I can't even prove I can afford to stay." Eleanor's eyes, sharp behind her bifocals, studied me thoughtfully. "What does the deed say exactly? Are you all equal owners?" I retrieved the document, and together we examined the legal language. "It says we're joint tenants with right of survivorship," I read. "What does that mean?" "It means you all own equal shares," Eleanor said. "But more importantly, it means you have the right to occupy and use the property during your lifetime. They can't force you out, Martha. Not legally." A small spark of hope ignited in my chest. "Are you sure?" "My second husband was a real estate attorney," she said with a wry smile. "I picked up a few things, but to be certain, you should talk to a lawyer yourself. I know someone who could help. William Parker. He's retired now, but he still consults. And he owes me a favor." The following Monday, I sat in Bill Parker's home office, a converted sunroom overlooking a meticulously maintained garden. At 72, Bill was older than me, but his mind was sharp as he explained the legal nuances of my situation. "Your friend Eleanor is right," he confirmed after reviewing the deed. "As a joint tenant, you have the right to occupy the property. Your sons can't force you to leave or sell without your consent." Relief made me lightheaded. "So they can't put me in Pinecrest against my will." Bill's expression sobered. "Well, that's a different issue. If they were to seek guardianship, claim, you're incompetent to make your own decisions. They could potentially override your wishes. But based on the medical assessment you showed me, they would have a very difficult time proving that." "Could they try?" The thought sent a chill through me. They could, but it would be an uphill battle. Courts are generally reluctant to strip adults of their autonomy without compelling evidence. I left Bill's office with a clearer understanding of my rights and a strategy for confronting my sons. I would stand my ground, refuse Pinecrest, and if necessary, seek legal protection from their interference. But when I arrived home, my plans were derailed by a sight that stopped me in my driveway. A moving truck parked in front of my house, and Michael directing men carrying boxes from my front door. I got out of my car, fury propelling me forward. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I demanded, my voice sharp enough to make the movers pause. Michael turned, startled. Mom, we've been trying to call you for days. So you decided to start packing up my house without my permission? He had the grace to look uncomfortable. We were worried when you didn't answer your phone. We thought something might have happened to you. So you called the police, checked the hospitals, or did you just decide it was a convenient time to start moving me out? Andrew emerged from the house carrying a box of what looked like my photo albums. Mom, calm down. We're not moving everything. Just helping you sort through what you'll want to take to Pinecrest. They've had a cancellation. There's a room available next week. I told you I'm not going to Pinecrest, I said, my voice shaking. This is my home and I'm staying here. We've been through this, Michael said, his patience visibly fraying. You can't afford to stay here, and we're not in a position to subsidize the repairs this place needs. I don't need your subsidy, I snapped, and you have no right to move my things without my consent. I want these men out of my house, now. A painful silence fell. The movers looked uncertainly between us, clearly uncomfortable with the family, drama unfolding before them. Guys, take a break, Michael finally told them. The men retreated gratefully to their truck, leaving the three of us standing in a tense triangle on the front lawn. Mom? Andrew began, his tone conciliatory. We're trying to help you. This isn't about taking away your independence. It's about making sure you're safe and cared for. If that were true, I said, you would listen to what I want. You would respect the medical assessment showing I'm perfectly capable of making my own decisions. You would help me find a way to stay in my home instead of trying to ship me off to a place I don't want to be. The decision is made, Mom, Michael said, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he must use with his employees. Pinecrest is expecting you next Tuesday. We've already paid the first month's fee. And if I refuse to go? I challenged. My sons exchanged another of their silent communications. It was Andrew who answered, his voice gentle but firm. Then we'll have to consider more formal options to ensure your well-being. The threat hung in the air between us, all the more chilling for its vague phrasing. More formal options. Guardianship. Court proceedings. My own children, seeking legal authority to override my wishes. I looked at these men, these strangers wearing my sons' faces, and made a decision that would change everything. Fine, I said flatly. I'll go to Pinecrest on Tuesday, but I want the movers gone now. I'll pack my own things. Relief washed over their features, so nakedly that I almost laughed. They thought they'd won. That's the right decision, Mom, Michael said, squeezing my shoulder. You'll see. Pinecrest is a great place. You'll make friends, have activities. It'll be like a permanent vacation. Speaking of vacations, Andrew added, his posture relaxing now that the confrontation was over. Lisa and I are taking the kids to Sunnyside Beach next week. 2 weeks of sun and sand. Michael and Diane are coming too, with their crew. How nice for you, I said, not bothering to mask the bitterness in my tone. A family vacation right after depositing me in a nursing home. It's not a nursing home, Mom, Michael corrected automatically, and the timing is just coincidence. We've had this planned for months. Of course they had. Planned their vacation while also planning my institutionalization, probably congratulating themselves on their efficiency. We should get you packed, Andrew said, glancing at his watch. There's not much time. I told you I'll pack myself, I insisted. I want to do this my way. After more protest and several patronizing reminders about Tuesday's schedule, they finally left, taking the movers with them. As their cars disappeared down the street, I sagged against the front door, emotionally exhausted. But beneath the exhaustion, a plan was forming. A desperate, possibly foolish plan, but one that would allow me to reclaim some measure of control over my life. First, I called Bill Parker. I need to know something, I said when he answered. If I agree to sell the house, Can my sons do anything with my share of the proceeds without my consent? No, he replied after a moment's consideration. That money would be yours to do with as you please. But Martha, are you sure selling is what you want? It's not what I want, I said grimly. But it may be what I need to do. Next, I called Eleanor. I need a huge favor, I told her, and it has to stay between us. Over the weekend, I packed one suitcase with the bare essentials, enough clothes for a week, basic toiletries, my medications, and a few precious mementos. The photo album from Howard's and my early years together. The small jewelry box containing my wedding ring and the silver locket Howard had given me on our 40th anniversary. My mother's recipe book. The rest, the furniture, the household items, accumulated over 4 decades, the physical artifacts of my life. I left where they stood. Let Michael and Andrew deal with them. Tuesday morning dawned bright and clear. My sons arrived at 10 a.m. sharp, both looking relieved when they found me waiting with my single suitcase. Is that all you're bringing? Andrew asked, surprised. It's all I need for now, I said. You can bring the rest of my things later. The drive to Pinecrest was silent, tension filling the car like invisible smoke. I stared out the window, memorizing the familiar streets of the town I'd called home for 40 years, wondering if I would ever see them again. Pinecrest itself was just as the brochure had promised. Well-maintained grounds, a modern facility with wide hallways and large windows, staff members who smiled with professional cheer as they welcomed us. My apartment was a single room with an attached bathroom, smaller than my master bedroom at home, but clean and pleasantly furnished. It's nice, right? Michael said, a hint of desperation in his voice as he watched me survey the space. And look, there's a common area just down the hall where they have activities. Bingo on Thursdays. Wonderful, I said flatly. I've always wanted to spend my golden years playing bingo with strangers. Mom, please try, Andrew pleaded. For us. For yourself. I turned to face them, these sons who had once been the center of my world. You should go, I said quietly. You have a vacation to prepare for. They lingered awkwardly, helping me unpack my meager belongings, showing me how to operate the emergency call button, introducing me to a nurse named Heather who would be my main point of contact. Finally, with backward glances and promises to call when they reached Sunnyside Beach, they left me alone in my new home. As soon as they were gone, I approached Heather at the nurse's station. I need to make some phone calls, I told her. Is there a private place I can do that? She directed me to a small room designated for residents to make confidential calls, medical consultations, legal matters, and the like. Once inside, I called Bill Parker. It's done, I told him when he answered. They've left me at Pinecrest and are headed to Sunnyside Beach tomorrow morning. Are you sure about this, Martha? He asked, concern evident in his voice. Once we set this in motion, there's no turning back. I'm sure, I said, with more confidence than I felt. They made their choice. Now I'm making mine. Next, I called Eleanor. It's time, I said simply. I'll pick you up in 20 minutes, she replied. Everything else is arranged. I returned to my room, where Heather was making notes on a clipboard. Getting settled in? She asked with a genuine smile. Heather was the only staff member who didn't speak to me as if I were either a child or already half senile. Actually, I said, lowering my voice, I have a favor to ask. A big one. Something in my expression must have communicated the seriousness of my request, because she set down her clipboard and gave me her full attention. What do you need, Mrs. Wilson? I need to leave for a few hours. It's important. Family business that can't wait. But I don't want anyone else to know I'm gone. She frowned. Mrs. Wilson, I can't help you leave without authorization. It's against facility policy. I know, and I would never ask you to risk your job. But what if I just happened to take a walk on the grounds? And what if my friend just happened to be waiting by the south gate? Would anyone really notice if I didn't come back for a few hours, as long as I returned before evening bed check? Heather studied me for a long moment. Your sons seemed pretty insistent about you staying here. My sons deposited me here against my wishes and then left for a 2-week beach vacation, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. I'm not checking out permanently. I just need to take care of something they didn't give me time to handle before bringing me here. Whether it was sympathy for my situation or simply an understanding of the indignity of having one's freedom curtailed, something in Heather's expression softened. Bed check is at 8 p.m., she said quietly. New residents often get turned around in the building. If you were in the library or the garden and missed dinner, it wouldn't be unusual. Relief washed over me. Thank you, I said, meaning it more than she could know. Just be back by 8, she reminded me, picking up her clipboard again. And Mrs. Wilson, whatever you're doing, be careful. 20 minutes later, I was in Eleanor's car, heading back toward the house I had called home for the last 40 years. Bill has the realtor meeting us there, Eleanor said as she drove. She's prepared to move quickly. And the lawyer? I asked, nervousness making my voice tight. He'll meet us at the bank at 3. All the paperwork is ready, just as you instructed. The plan I'd set in motion was simple in concept, if complex in execution. Since I couldn't prevent my sons from selling the house eventually, I would sell it first, immediately for cash, at a price well below market value to ensure a quick sale. The buyers, a young couple Eleanor knew through her church, had been looking for a home in our neighborhood for months and had cash ready from an inheritance. They would get a good deal. I would get the liquid assets I needed to secure my independence. As for my son's shares of the proceeds, well, that would require some creative accounting, but Bill had assured me it was all legal, if perhaps not entirely in the spirit of familial harmony. We pulled into the driveway of my home, and for a moment, I felt a wave of doubt. Was I really doing this? Selling the family home out from under my children? But then I remembered the moving truck, the condescending explanations, the way they'd planned their vacation to coincide with my institutionalization. The doubt receded, replaced by resolve. The next few hours passed in a blur of paperwork, signatures, and banking transactions. The young couple, James and Rachel, were both awed by their good fortune and visibly uncomfortable with the circumstances, but their need for a home overcome their misgivings. By 5 o'clock, the deed was transferred. My portion of the proceeds, minus what would officially go to my sons, was safely deposited in a new account only I could access, and I had a suite booked at Lakeside Village, a retirement community, across town that allowed residents complete independence while offering optional services as needed. Are you absolutely sure about this, Martha? Bill asked one final time as we concluded our business. Your sons will be. Upset doesn't begin to cover it. I'm sure, I said, feeling lighter than I had in months. They decided I was incapable of managing my own life. They're about to discover how wrong they were. Eleanor dropped me back at Pinecrest well before the 8 p.m. bed check. Nurse Heather gave me a small nod as I passed the station, a silent acknowledgement of my return and her part in my brief escape. In my room, I unpacked the few items I'd brought, placing them carefully in the drawers and on the nightstand. Then, I sat on the edge of the narrow bed, took out my phone, and composed a text message to both my sons. Enjoying your first day at the beach? Don't worry about me. I've made some changes you'll want to discuss when you return. Until then, Pinecrest is adequate. I sent it before I could reconsider, then turned off my phone and lay back on the bed, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling. For the first time since Howard died, I felt a sense of anticipation rather than dread when thinking about the future. Whatever came next would be on my terms. Not Howard's, not my son's, but mine. And for now, that was enough. The next 2 weeks passed with excruciating slowness. I settled into the rhythm of Pinecrest, if not comfortably, then at least with a semblance of cooperation. I ate meals in the dining room, participated minimally in activities, and maintained a polite distance from the other residents, most of whom were far more physically or cognitively impaired than I was. Heather became something of an ally, sharing gossip from the outside world during her shifts and smuggling in decent coffee instead of the weak brew served in the dining hall. I didn't tell her about selling the house or my plans to move to Lakeside Village. The fewer people who knew, the less chance of my sons finding out before they returned. They called every evening from Sunnyside Beach, Michael usually speaking while I could hear the others in the background, the grandchildren laughing, waves crashing, the sounds of a family vacation in full swing. Our conversations were brief and superficial. Yes, Pinecrest was fine. Yes, the food was adequate. No, I didn't need anything. Of course I was making friends. I didn't mention the text I'd sent on that first night, and neither did they. Either they hadn't understood its implication, or they were choosing to ignore what they didn't want to face. On the day they were due to return, I packed my suitcase again and sat waiting in my room. Bill had assured me that there was nothing my sons could do legally to force me to stay at Pinecrest. I was a voluntary resident who had passed all cognitive assessments. I could check myself out at any time. Still, I anticipated resistance, which was why Eleanor would be arriving at 2 p.m. to drive me to Lakeside Village. Bill would meet us there, with the final paperwork for my new living arrangement, a spacious one-bedroom apartment in a community that emphasized independence and dignity for seniors. At 1:30, my phone rang. Michael's number. I answered, keeping my voice neutral. Hello? What the hell did you do? His voice was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. In the background, I could hear what sounded like Andrew shouting, 2. I assume you're home, I said calmly. Home? Home? There are strangers living in our house, Mom, a couple with a baby. They say they bought it, from you. They did, I confirmed. James and Rachel are a lovely young family. I'm sure they'll be very happy there. You had no right, Andrew's voice now, having apparently wrestled the phone from his brother. That house wasn't just yours to sell. No, it wasn't, I agreed. Which is why your shares of the proceeds are waiting for you at Bill Parker's office. Considerably less than you might have gotten on the open market, I'm afraid. But that was the price of a quick sale. Silence fell on the other end of the line, so profound I might have thought the call had dropped if not for the sound of heavy breathing. You sold our house, Michael said finally, his voice flat with disbelief. Just as you were planning to do to finance my stay at Pinecrest, I pointed out. I simply took the initiative. Where are you going to live? Andrew demanded. You can't stay at Pinecrest without the house proceeds to pay for it. I'm aware of that, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the butterflies in my stomach. I've made other arrangements. What arrangements? Michael demanded, his professional composure completely abandoned. What are you talking about? I've secured an apartment at Lakeside Village, I told him. I move in today, in fact. My friend Eleanor is picking me up in about 20 minutes. Lakeside Village! Andrew's voice rose in pitch. That luxury retirement community on the north side? How could you possibly afford that? With my share of the house proceeds, I explained, as if to a particularly slow child. The sale price was enough to secure me a comfortable place there, with plenty left over for living expenses. But, Michael spluttered, clearly struggling to process this turn of events. You can't just... You didn't what, Michael? I asked, my patience finally fraying. Didn't think I would push back against being shipped off to a place I didn't want to be? Didn't imagine I had the capacity to make my own arrangements? Or didn't believe I had the right to determine my own future? Silence fell again, heavier this time. When Andrew spoke, his voice was tight with controlled fury. We're coming to get you. Stay where you are. I'm afraid that won't be possible, I said. By the time you get here from Sunnyside Beach, I'll be settled in my new home. But you're welcome to visit me there, after you've had some time to reflect on how we reached this point. Mom, this is insane, Michael said, desperation creeping into his tone. You're not thinking clearly. Let us help you. I've had enough of your help, I replied, my voice suddenly cold even to my own ears. Your kind of help landed me in a nursing home while you enjoyed the beach. Your kind of help involved making decisions about my life without consulting. Me, your kind of help made me feel like a burden rather than a person. That's not fair, Andrew protested. We were trying to do what's best for you. Best for me? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. Or most convenient for you? Did either of you consider what I wanted? What would make me happy? Or was I just a problem to be solved before you could go on vacation with a clear conscience? The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. I have to go now, I said. Eleanor will be here soon. You can reach me at my cell number if you need to, though I think we could all use some time to cool down. Mom, wait. Michael began, but I ended the call, my hand trembling slightly as I set the phone down. A soft knock at my door made me jump. Heather poked her head in, concern etched on her face. Everything okay, Mrs. Wilson? I could hear raised voices. My son's just discovered the house has been sold, I said, attempting a smile that probably looked more like a grimace. They're not taking it well. Heather's eyes widened. You sold their house? I sold my house, I corrected. The one they were planning to sell anyway to pay for this place. I gestured around the small room that had been my temporary prison. Well, Heather said after a moment, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. That's one way to make a point. It's more than a point, I told her. It's a declaration of independence. Eleanor arrived precisely at 2, as promised. Checking out of Pinecrest proved easier than I'd anticipated, since I was classified as a voluntary resident, and my cognitive assessments were all normal. There was little the administration could do to stop me, especially with Bill Parker's legal letter in hand, clearly stating my rights. The drive to Lakeside Village was short but significant, a journey from dependence to autonomy. As Eleanor's car crested the hill revealing the sprawling community nestled against the shore of Lake Harmony, I felt a surge of something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. It's beautiful, I murmured, taking in the well-maintained grounds, the modern buildings designed to blend with the natural landscape, the residents visible on walking paths and garden benches, clearly active and engaged. Wait until you see. Your apartment, Eleanor said, squeezing my hand. It has the most gorgeous view of the lake. Bill Parker was waiting for us in the reception area, a folder of documents under his arm and a cautious smile on his face. Any word from your sons? He asked as he escorted us to the administrative offices. They called just before I left Pinecrest, I told him. They're upset. That's putting it mildly, I imagine, he said dryly. They'll come around eventually. Martha. But in the meantime, let's make sure everything is in order for your new beginning. The next hour passed in a flurry of signatures, handshakes, and welcome orientations. My apartment, as Eleanor had promised, was lovely. Spacious, filled with light, with large windows overlooking the lake. The kitchen was small but efficient, the bathroom equipped with safety features that didn't scream old person, and the bedroom large enough for the queen-sized bed I planned to purchase as my first act of self-indulgence. The movers will bring your things tomorrow, Bill reminded me as he prepared to leave. In the meantime, Eleanor has arranged for some basics to get you through the night. Indeed, Eleanor had thought of everything. Toiletries, a change of clothes, even a simple dinner that could be heated in the microwave that came with the apartment. I don't know how to thank you both, I said, emotion threatening to overwhelm. Me as the reality of what I'd done, what we'd done, finally sank in. For believing in me, for helping me take back my life. You did the hard part, Eleanor said, hugging me tightly. We just provided some logistical support. And legal cover, Bill added with a wink. Speaking of which, I should prepare for the inevitable visit from your sons. They'll be at my office demanding explanations as soon as they get back to town. After they left, I explored my new home more thoroughly, running my hands over surfaces, opening and closing drawers, testing. The firmness of the mattress. The apartment came partially furnished, which was fortunate given that I'd left nearly everything behind in the house. Tomorrow I would need to go shopping for essentials. Clothes, kitchenware, perhaps a few decorative items to make the space truly mine. As evening fell, casting golden light across the lake visible from my balcony, I realized I hadn't felt this peaceful in years. Not since before Howard got sick, certainly. Perhaps even longer. There was something profoundly liberating about having taken control of my life, even if the method had been dramatic and would undoubtedly strain my relationship with my sons for some time to come. I was just finishing the simple meal Eleanor had provided when my phone rang, Andrew's number. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but decided that avoidance would only worsen an already tense situation. "Hello, Andrew," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Mom." His voice was strained but calmer than earlier. "We're back in town, tried to go home, but—" He trailed off, unable to complete the sentence. "I'm sorry it was such a shock," I said, meaning it. "I should have found a better way to tell you." "A better way?" He gave a hollow laugh. "Than selling our family home while we were on vacation? Yeah, I think there might have been a few better options." I sighed, leaning back in my chair. "Perhaps. But would you have listened? Really listened to what I wanted? Not what you thought was best for me?" His silence was answer enough. "Where are you staying?" I asked, softening my tone. "Michael's. We're all crammed in here. Lisa and the kids and me. Diane's not happy." "I imagine not," I said, picturing the chaos of two families suddenly sharing Michael's precise minimalist house. "You could go to a hotel." "On what money, Mom? Our house is gone, and you said our share of the proceeds is with Bill Parker, who conveniently isn't answering his phone." The guilt I'd been holding at bay began to seep in. My actions, justified as they felt to me, had displaced not just my sons but their families as well. Children who had nothing to do with their father's decisions regarding my care. "I'll call Bill first thing in the morning," I promised. "He'll release your shares immediately. And Andrew, you should know that I instructed him to ensure you and Michael each received exactly 1/3 of the proceeds. I didn't shortchange you." "Except by selling below market value," he pointed out. "Yes," I acknowledged. "That was necessary for the quick sale. I'm sorry for that loss." Another silence stretched between us. Finally, Andrew spoke again, his voice heavy with a mixture of anger and confusion. "Why, Mom? Why did you do this instead of just telling us how you felt?" The question hit me like a physical blow. Had I not tried to tell them? Had I not explicitly said I didn't want to go to Pinecrest? But perhaps he was right. Perhaps I hadn't made them understand the depth of my feelings, the core of my objection. "I did try to tell you," I said softly. "When you first brought up Pinecrest, I told you I didn't want to go. I showed you Dr. Patterson's assessment proving I was capable of living independently. But you and Michael had already made up your minds. You'd already put down a deposit, already decided what was best for me without considering what I actually wanted." "We were worried about you," he insisted. "The house was too much to maintain, and you seemed lonely." "I was lonely," I admitted. "After your father died, I was desperately lonely. But the solution to loneliness isn't institutionalization, Andrew. It's connection. Real connection, not being warehoused with strangers while my family goes to the beach." "That's not fair," he protested, but with less conviction than before. "No, it wasn't fair," I agreed. None of this has been fair. Not to me. And now, not to you and your families. I'm sorry for the disruption I've caused, truly. But I'm not sorry for refusing to be sidelined in my own life. A long pause followed, filled with the weight of words said and unsaid. Finally, Andrew sighed, a sound so heavy with fatigue that I could almost see him running his hand through his hair as he always did when overwhelmed. Michael wants to talk to you too, but he's still too angry. Lisa says to tell you the kids are confused and upset about why Grandma would sell their house. The mention of my grandchildren sent another pang of guilt through me. Tell them I love them, I said. And when things settle down, I'd like them to visit me here. It's a beautiful place, with walking trails and a lake. They might enjoy it. Where exactly is here? Andrew asked. Lakeside Village. I have an apartment overlooking the water. It's small, but it's mine. And Andrew, I can afford it. I didn't do this without careful planning. He made a non-committal sound. We'll see about that, Bill Parker. Finally called Michael back. We're meeting him tomorrow morning. Good, I said. He'll explain everything. And once you have your share of the proceeds, you can find a new place for your family. It won't be the same, he said, a note of genuine grief in his voice that tugged at my heart. No, I agreed gently. It won't be. Change rarely is the same as what came before. But different doesn't have to mean worse, Andrew. Sometimes it can mean better, if we're open to the possibility. After we hung up, I sat on my new balcony, watching the last light fade from the sky, turning the lake to a sheet of burnished silver. My conversation with Andrew had been difficult, but necessary. Tomorrow would likely bring a confrontation with Michael, who had always been the more volatile of my sons, quicker to anger but also quicker to forgive, I hoped. I didn't regret my actions, drastic as they had been. But I did regret the pain they had caused, especially to my grandchildren. Somehow, I would need to find a way to repair those relationships without surrendering the independence I had fought so hard to secure. The next morning dawned clear and bright, sunshine sparkling on the lake as I enjoyed my first cup of coffee. In my new home, I had slept surprisingly well. The emotional exhaustion of the previous day coupled with the comfort of the unfamiliar bed, conspiring to grant me the deepest rest I'd had in months. My phone rang just after 9. Michael's number. I steeled myself before answering. Good morning, Michael. Where are you? He demanded without preamble. We're at Bill's office. He won't discuss anything without you present. I told Bill I'd be there at 10, I said, checking the clock. He should have mentioned that to you. He did. I'm calling to make sure you actually show up. The distrust in his voice stung, though I supposed it was warranted given recent events. I'll be there, I assured him. Eleanor is driving me. Of course she is, he muttered. Your accomplice. My friend, I corrected. Someone who cares about what I want, not just what's convenient for everyone else. He made a sound of frustration. Just be here at 10. The call ended abruptly. Eleanor picked me up at 9:30, her expression concerned as she took in my appearance. You look tired, Martha. Did you sleep? Surprisingly well, I told her. But I'm dreading this meeting. It won't be pleasant, she agreed, but it's necessary, and Bill will keep things civil. Bill's office was a study in controlled chaos when we arrived. Papers everywhere, law books stacked on surfaces, his ancient desktop computer humming loudly in the corner. Michael and Andrew sat stiffly in client chairs, both wearing expressions that might have been carved from stone. Ah, Martha, right on time, Bill said, rising to greet me with a warmth that stood in stark contrast to the frigid reception from my sons. Please have a seat. Eleanor, will you be joining us? I'll wait outside, she said, squeezing my hand. Before retreating, closing the door behind her. An uncomfortable silence fell as I took the remaining chair, facing my sons across Bill's cluttered desk. Up close, I could see the strain of the past 24 hours etched on their faces. Michael's jaw tight with barely contained fury. Andrew's eyes shadowed with fatigue and confusion. "Well," Bill said, shuffling papers into some semblance of order, "let's get down to business, shall we? As you know, the family home at 342 Maple Street has been sold to James and Rachel Chen for the sum of $320,000. While this is approximately 15% below current market value, it was a cash sale with no contingencies, which facilitated the rapid completion of the transaction." "Without the consent of 2/3 of the owners," Michael interjected sharply. Bill adjusted his glasses, regarding Michael with the patience of a man who had dealt with angry clients for over 4 decades. "Actually, Michael, the sale was entirely legal. As joint tenants with right of survivorship, any owner can initiate a sale. The proceeds must be divided equally among all owners, but the action itself requires only one party's signature." "That can't be right," Andrew protested. "We would never have agreed to an arrangement that would allow Mom to sell without our consent." "The deed was structured this way by your father," Bill said, his tone gentle but firm. "Howard came to see me about a year before he passed away. He wanted to ensure that Martha would have maximum flexibility in managing the property after his death, while still preserving your inheritance rights." This was news to me. I stared at Bill, trying to process this revelation. Howard had anticipated this scenario, had arranged things specifically to give me this power? The thought brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "So she legally stole our house?" Michael said flatly. "Wonderful." "She sold a house that was 1/3 hers," Bill corrected, "and has preserved your shares of the proceeds exactly as required by law." He slid 2 envelopes across the desk. "Here are checks representing your portions of the sale, minus the standard closing costs, which were divided equally among all 3 owners." Michael made no move to take his envelope. Andrew picked his up reluctantly, opening it to examine. The check inside. "This is it?" Andrew asked, disappointment evident in his voice. "This won't even cover a down payment on a comparable house in this market. The market has changed significantly since your father purchased that house 40 years ago," Bill noted. "But it's a substantial sum nonetheless, enough to secure alternative housing, perhaps not in the same neighborhood, but certainly within the greater Oak Ridge area." Michael finally snatched his envelope, not bothering to open it. "And what about Mom? Where is she living now that she's burned her bridges and displaced her family?" "I've secured an apartment at Lakeside Village," I said, speaking for the first time since the meeting began. "It's small but comfortable, and the community offers various services that will allow me to maintain my independence as I age." "Lakeside Village," Michael repeated incredulously. "The place where apartments start at $500,000? How exactly are you affording that on your equal share of the proceeds?" Bill intervened smoothly. "Martha's financial arrangements are private, but I can assure you that everything has been done legally and ethically. She has sufficient resources to maintain herself comfortably at Lakeside Village for the foreseeable future." "What does that mean?" Andrew asked, suspicion clouding his features. "Did Dad leave her money we didn't know about?" "Your father's estate was divided exactly as his will stipulated," Bill said carefully. "But Martha also had resources of her own: investments, retirement accounts, life insurance proceeds, and she's living quite modestly at Lakeside, in one of their smaller units." This was a slight stretching of the truth. While I did have my own modest savings and Howard's life insurance, the truth was that I'd been able to afford Lakeside Village precisely because I didn't have a mortgage or significant ongoing expenses. The one-time payment for the apartment, substantial as it was, still left me with enough to live on comfortably, especially supplemented by my Social Security and Howard's pension. "So that's it?" Michael said, his voice rising. "She sells our family home, disrupts our entire lives, and we're supposed to just accept it and move on." "What would you have me do, Michael?" I asked quietly. Return to Pinecrest? Surrender my autonomy to make you more comfortable with what's happened? You could have talked to us, he exploded. You could have told us how you really felt, instead of taking such a drastic action. I tried, I said, feeling a weariness settle into my bones. I told you I didn't want to go to Pinecrest. I showed you the medical assessment proving I was capable of living independently. I suggested alternatives, taking in a boarder, getting a part-time job. You dismissed every suggestion, every objection. You'd already decided what was best for me, and nothing I said was going to change your minds. We were worried about you, Andrew said, echoing his words from our phone conversation. I know you were, I acknowledged, but worry doesn't give you the right to take over my life, to make decisions about my future without meaningful input from me. I'm your mother, not your child. So you decided to teach us a lesson, Michael said bitterly. Congratulations. Message received. I hope it was worth destroying our relationship. His words hit me like a physical blow. Had I really gone too far? Had my desperate bid for independence cost me my relationship with my children? With my grandchildren? The thought was almost unbearable. I don't want our relationship destroyed, I said softly. I want it transformed. I want to be seen as a person with agency and desires, not just a problem to be managed. I want to be part of decisions that affect my life, not simply informed after the fact. I want respect, Michael. The same respect you'd want in my position. Michael stood abruptly, shoving the envelope into his pocket. I need some air, he muttered, striding toward the door. He paused with his hand on the knob, not turning around. Andrew, I'll wait for you in the car. After he left, Andrew and I sat in uncomfortable silence. Bill discreetly busied himself with paperwork, giving us the illusion of privacy. He'll calm down eventually, Andrew said finally. But this is hard, Mom. Really hard. The kids keep asking when they can go home, and I don't know what to tell them. The mention of my grandchildren pierced me anew. I'm sorry about that, I said sincerely. I never meant to hurt them, or you and Lisa, or Michael's family. I just couldn't see another way to make you understand how serious I was about not going to Pinecrest. Andrew sighed heavily. I get it. I mean, I don't agree with what you did, but I understand why you felt backed into a corner. We should have listened better. It was a small concession, but it felt like the first crack in the wall of anger and resentment separating us. Thank you for that, I said. It means a lot. He nodded, rising to his feet. I should go. Michael's waiting and we need to figure out our next steps. Where to live? What to tell the kids? He trailed off, the enormity of the situation clearly, overwhelming him. Andrew, I said impulsively, bring the children to visit me at Lakeside Village. Let them see that I'm okay, that I haven't abandoned them. It might help them understand, at least a little. He hesitated, then nodded. Maybe, when things settle down a bit. He moved toward the door, then paused, turning back. Mom, I'm glad you're not at Pinecrest. It wasn't right for you. I see that now. I just wish you'd found another way to make us understand. So do I admitted. But what's done is done. All we can do now is try to move forward. After he left, Bill removed his glasses, polishing them absently with his handkerchief. That went about as well as could be expected, he observed. Michael may never forgive me, I said, the reality of that possibility settling heavily on my shoulders. Give him time, Bill advised. He feels betrayed and embarrassed. His pride is wounded. But he loves you, Martha. That doesn't disappear overnight, no matter how angry he is. I hoped he was right. The thought of permanent estrangement from my elder son was painful beyond words, yet I couldn't bring myself to regret the core of what I'd done. Taking control, of my own destiny, refusing to be sidelined in decisions about my life. The method had been drastic, perhaps even cruel in its execution, but the principle behind it remained sound. Eleanor was waiting patiently in the reception area, attempting to look as though she hadn't been straining to overhear the meeting through the closed door. "How did it go?" she asked as we left Bill's office. "About as well as a root canal without anesthetic," I replied wryly. Michael stormed out. "Andrew is processing, but at least the financial aspects are settled." "And you?" she pressed. "How are you doing with all this?" I considered the question as we walked to her car. I don't know. Relieved that it's over. Sad about the rift with my sons, worried about my grandchildren. But underneath all that, there's something else. A sense of ownership. Of my life, my choices. It's unfamiliar, but not unwelcome. Eleanor smiled, linking her arm through mine. "That's called empowerment, my dear. And it looks good on you." Back at Lakeside Village, I found the movers had already delivered the few belongings I'd arranged to have brought from Pinecrest, my single suitcase, plus a few additional items Eleanor had collected from the house before the sale. Photo albums, Howard's favorite chair, my grandmother's quilt. Not much to show for a lifetime, but enough to start building something new. As I unpacked, placing familiar objects in unfamiliar spaces, I found myself thinking about the choices that had led me to this moment. The slow erosion of my autonomy after Howard's death. The gradual marginalization within my own family. The desperate gamble I'd taken to reclaim control of my life. Had there been another way? Perhaps. A gentler path. A more gradual assertion of independence. But would my sons have listened? Would they have truly heard me if I hadn't taken such drastic action? I couldn't know for certain, but the evidence suggested otherwise. Sometimes, a seismic shock was necessary to break through entrenched patterns of thinking and behavior. In the days that followed, I settled into my new routine at Lakeside Village. The community was everything I'd hoped for. Active, engaging, respectful of residents' independence while providing support as needed. I joined a book club, signed up for Tai Chi classes by the lake, and even volunteered in the community garden, putting my years of gardening experience to good use. Eleanor visited frequently, bringing news from the outside world and updates gleaned from mutual acquaintances. Michael and his family had rented an apartment while they looked for a new house. Andrew and Lisa had moved in with her parents temporarily, an arrangement that was already showing signs of strain. The grandchildren were adjusting, though they still asked questions about why Grandma had sold their house. A week after the meeting, in Bill's office I received an unexpected visitor. I was returning from a walk around the lake when I spotted Lisa, Michael's wife, sitting on a bench near the entrance to my building. She rose when she saw me, her expression a mixture of determination and uncertainty. "Lisa," I said, genuinely surprised, "is everything all right?" "That depends on your definition of all right," she replied with a strained smile. "May we talk somewhere private?" I led her to my apartment, acutely aware of how little I'd been able to do with the space in just a week. It was still sparsely furnished, though I'd added a few houseplants and framed photos to make it feel more like home. "It's nice," Lisa said, looking around. "Smaller than I expected, but nice. The view is beautiful." "Thank you," I said, gesturing for her to sit in one of the 2 chairs I'd purchased for the small dining area. "Can I get you something to drink? I have water, tea, or coffee." "Water would be fine," she said, perching on the edge of the chair as if ready to flee at any moment. As I filled a glass from the tap, I tried to prepare myself for whatever had brought her here. Of my 2 daughters-in-law, Lisa had always been the more diplomatic, the peacemaker. If she had come without Michael, it was likely in an attempt to broker some kind of reconciliation. "How is everyone?" I asked, setting the water before her and taking the opposite chair. Adjusting, she said carefully. The apartment is smaller than we're used to, but it's temporary. Michael is looking at houses in Westbrook, about 20 minutes from here. Westbrook is lovely, I said. Good schools. Lisa nodded, taking a small sip of water. Martha, I'll be direct. Michael is still very angry. He feels betrayed, not just by the sale of the house, but by the way it was done. While he was away, unable to intervene. I understand that, I said. And there's part of me that regrets the method. But not the outcome, Lisa. I couldn't go back to Pinecrest. I couldn't surrender my independence that way. No one is suggesting you should, she said, surprising me. Whatever Michael and Andrew's original intentions, it was clear, within days, that Pinecrest wasn't the right place for you. Even the kids noticed when we visited. Grandma doesn't belong here, Tyler said. She's not old enough. A small smile tugged at my lips at the thought of my teenage grandson's assessment. Smart boy. The point is, Lisa continued, there could have been other solutions, discussions, compromises. Instead, you chose the nuclear option. After feeling that every other option had been dismissed, I pointed out. But you're right. I should have tried harder to make them understand how important my independence is to me. How devastating it felt to be deposited in Pinecrest while you all went on vacation. Lisa had the grace to look uncomfortable. That timing was unfortunate. The vacation had been planned for months, but the opening at Pinecrest came up suddenly. In retrospect, one of us should have stayed behind, at least for a few days, to help you settle in. The acknowledgement, small as it was, felt like the first genuine recognition of how the situation had appeared from my perspective. Thank you for saying that, I said softly. Lisa set down her glass, her expression turning serious. I didn't come here to critique past decisions, yours or ours. I came because the children miss you, especially Zoe. She cries at night sometimes asking why Grandma is mad at us. The thought of my youngest grandchild crying herself to sleep over something I had done sent a wave of guilt through me so powerful it nearly took my breath away. I'm not mad at any of you, I said, my voice catching. Especially not the children. Please tell them that. You could tell them yourself, Lisa suggested, if you're willing to see them. Of course I am, I said immediately. Anytime, Lisa. They're always welcome here. You all are. She nodded, seemingly satisfied with my response. I'll talk to Michael. He's still too angry to see you himself, but he might agree to let me bring the children for a visit. If, she added with emphasis, you promise not to discuss the house situation with them. They're confused enough as it is. I promise, I said. I just want to see them, to assure them I'm okay and that I love them, no matter what. Lisa stood, picking up her purse. I'll call you tomorrow after I've spoken with Michael. And Martha, for what it's worth, I understand why you did what you did. I don't approve of the method, but I understand the motivation. If I were in your position, forced into a place I didn't want to be, treated like I couldn't make my own decisions. She trailed off, shaking her head. Let's just say I might have done something equally dramatic. After she left, I sat for a long time looking out at the lake, watching the late afternoon sun turn the water to gold. Lisa's visit had been unexpected but not unwelcome. A small opening, a tiny crack in the wall of estrangement that had formed between me and my family. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet, but it was a beginning. That evening I received a text from Andrew. Mom, heard Lisa visited. We'd like to bring the kids to see you Saturday afternoon. Is 2 p.m. okay? The simple message brought tears to my eyes. Not just Andrew, but we. He and Lisa together. And the children. It was more than I had dared to hope for so soon. 2 p.m. Saturday is perfect, I replied. I'll have cookies waiting. As I prepared for bed that night, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in weeks. The path forward would not be easy. There would be difficult conversations, painful adjustments, relationships to rebuild on new foundations of mutual respect rather than assumed authority. But for the first time since this all began, I believed it might be possible, that what I had broken might be mended, not into its original form, but into something new and perhaps stronger for having been broken and repaired. Howard had always told me I was stronger than I knew. It had taken losing everything, my husband, my home, temporarily even my relationship with my children, to discover just how right he had been. Strength wasn't about never breaking. It was about having the courage to remake yourself from the broken pieces. As I drifted toward sleep, I found myself looking forward to Saturday with a mixture of anticipation and nervous hope. My grandchildren would be here, in this new space I was creating for myself. They would see that Grandma was okay, different, but okay. And perhaps, in time, my sons would come to understand that their mother was not a problem to be managed, but a woman still very much engaged in the business of living, on her own terms. It wasn't the ending I had imagined for myself at this stage of life, but then, perhaps it wasn't an ending at all, but rather a new beginning. Unexpected, challenging, but ultimately mine to shape as I chose. Saturday arrived with perfect spring weather, sunshine filtering through wisps of cloud, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of fresh blossoms from the lakeside village gardens. I had been up since dawn, alternating between excited preparation and anxious fretting over every detail of the impending visit. I had baked chocolate chip cookies, my grandchildren's favorite, and arranged them on the blue ceramic plate Howard had given me for our 30th anniversary. I tidied my already neat apartment, fluffed pillows that didn't need fluffing, and reorganized photographs on the small side table 3 different times before finally forcing myself to sit down with a cup of tea and breathe. The knock, when it came at exactly 2 o'clock, still managed to startle me. I smoothed my hair, straightened my blouse, and opened the door with what I hoped was a natural smile. "Grandma!" 10-year-old Zoe didn't wait for an invitation, launching herself at me with the uninhibited affection of childhood. I caught her in a hug that nearly knocked me off balance, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Hello, sweetheart," I said, blinking back sudden tears. "I've missed you." Andrew stood in the doorway, his hand on 13-year-old Jacob's shoulder. Lisa hovered behind them with Tyler, who at 17 was trying his best to look bored rather than uncomfortable. "Come in, please," I said, stepping, back with Zoe still clinging to my side. "I'm so glad you could come." Andrew nodded stiffly, ushering the others into my apartment. I watched their faces as they took in my new living space, Jacob's frank curiosity, Lisa's polite assessment, Tyler's studied indifference. Andrew's expression was harder to read, a mixture of relief and lingering resentment. "It's nice," Lisa said, echoing her comment from earlier in the week. "Very bright and open." "The view is cool," Jacob offered, moving toward the balcony doors. "Can we see the lake from here?" "Yes, and there's a path that goes all the way around it," I told him. "Maybe we can walk it together sometime." "I made cookies," I said, gesturing toward the living area where I'd set up a small spread of refreshments. "And there's lemonade or water, if you're thirsty from the drive." This simple hospitality seemed to break some of the initial tension. The children gravitated toward the cookies, Tyler finally dropping his affected disinterest long enough to grab 2 of the largest ones. Andrew remained standing, his posture still rigid, but Lisa sat on the small sofa, patting the spot beside her in invitation. "How are you settling in?" she asked as I joined her. "Do you have everything you need?" "Almost," I said. "I'm still collecting essentials. Eleanor's been a godsend, driving me to stores and helping me choose furniture." I glanced around, at the still sparsely decorated space. "It's coming together slowly." Andrew finally spoke, his voice carefully neutral. It's farther from town than I expected. How do you get around if Eleanor isn't available? Lakeside Village has a shuttle service for residents, I explained. It runs to the grocery store, the mall, and the medical complex 3 times a week. And there's a rideshare program for other destinations. He nodded, absorbing this information with the same careful analysis he'd applied to every problem since childhood. My practical, thoughtful son, always calculating variables and outcomes. Unlike Michael, whose passionate reactions often overshadowed his reasoning. "Grandma, where's all your stuff?" Jacob asked around a mouthful of cookie, gesturing at the nearly empty bookshelves and bare walls. "Don't you have pictures and books and things anymore?" Lisa shot him a warning look, but I smiled reassuringly. "I'm starting fresh, Jacob. Sometimes, when you make a big change in your life, it's good to surround yourself with new things that match your new beginning." "But what about all the old stuff?" he persisted. "Like Grandpa's big chair and your fancy dishes and the model ships I used to play with?" A flash of the house as I'd last seen it passed through my mind. Rooms filled with the accumulated treasures and trinkets of 4 decades, each imbued with memories. I had left almost everything behind, taking only what would fit in a single suitcase, plus the few items Eleanor had salvaged before the sale was finalized. "Some things I brought with me," I said, gesturing to Howard's reading chair in the corner and the quilt draped over the back of the sofa. "The most special things. The rest." I hesitated, not wanting to upset the children further. "The rest are just objects, honey. The memories are what matter, and I carry those with me wherever I go." "But," Jacob began, only to be cut off by Tyler. "She sold it all with the house, dummy," the teenager said, his first contribution to the conversation carrying the sharp edge of adolescent bluntness. "That's why we can't go home. Grandma sold everything." "Tyler?" Lisa admonished sharply. "That's enough." An uncomfortable silence fell. Zoe, who had been happily munching cookies, looked up with a frown. "You sold our house, Grandma? Why would you do that?" I glanced at Andrew and Lisa, unsure how to respond without violating my promise not to discuss the situation with the children. It was Andrew who intervened, his voice gentler than I'd expected. Grandma needed to make some changes in her life. Zoe. The house was too big for her to take care of by herself, and she wanted a place where she could have friends her own age nearby. It wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't a lie either. I shot him a grateful look. "That's right, sweetie. And look at this lovely place I found. I have a view of the lake, and there's a community garden where I can grow flowers. And even a little theater where they show movies twice a week." Zoe seemed satisfied with this explanation, but Tyler wasn't so easily distracted. "If you needed to move, why didn't you just tell Dad and Uncle Michael? Why did you have to do it while we were on vacation?" The directness of his question caught me off guard. I looked to Lisa for guidance, but she merely raised an eyebrow, leaving me to navigate this minefield on my own. "Sometimes," I said carefully, "grown-ups don't communicate as well as they should. Your dad and uncle thought they knew what was best for me, and I thought I knew what was best for me, and we didn't talk about it properly. So I made a decision on my own that affected all of you, and I'm very sorry for that." Tyler held my gaze for a long moment, his expression so reminiscent of Michael's scrutinizing stare that it made my heart ache. Finally, he nodded once. "Dad says you had no right to sell our house, but Uncle Andrew says it was legally yours to sell. Which is it?" "That's a complicated question, Tyler," I began, but he cut me off. "No, it's not. Either you had the right to sell it or you didn't. The rest is just feelings." He said the word with the particular disdain teenagers reserve for emotional complications. Despite the tension of the moment, I found myself smiling at his logic. "You're right," I acknowledged. "Legally, I had the right to sell the house. Your grandfather arranged it that way before he died. But ethically, emotionally, that's where it gets complicated." Because even though I had the legal right, the decision affected all of you in ways that weren't fair. And for that part, I am truly sorry." He considered this, then shrugged, reaching for another cookie. "Dad's really mad." "I know he is, honey, and he has a right to be. I hope someday he'll understand why I did what I did, but in the meantime, I'm just grateful that you and Jacob and Zoe are here today. I've missed you all so much." The conversation gradually shifted to safer topics: school projects, Zoe's upcoming dance recital, Jacob's science fair entry. Andrew remained mostly silent, but I noticed his posture slowly relaxing as the afternoon wore on. At one point, he even smiled at something Zoe said, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him since before the Pinecrest debacle. Lisa suggested a walk around the lake, an idea the children greeted with enthusiasm. As we strolled along the paved pathway, Zoe's small hand tucked trustingly in mine, I felt a cautious hope unfurling in my chest. This visit wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation, not yet. But it was a beginning, a small breach in the wall of anger and hurt that had separated me from my family. We were nearing the far side of the lake when Andrew fell into step beside me, slowing his pace to match mine while Lisa walked ahead with the children. "You seem content here," he observed, his tone neutral. "I am," I said simply. "It's not what I expected for this stage of my life, but it suits me. I have my independence, but I'm not isolated. There's a community, people who see me as a person, not just a problem to be managed." He winced slightly at my word choice. "Is that how you felt? Like a problem?" "Increasingly, yes," I admitted. "After your father died, I felt myself becoming more peripheral to all of your lives. Not intentionally, I know. Everyone was busy with their own concerns. But gradually, I became someone to check in on occasionally, rather than someone to engage with meaningfully." Andrew was silent for several steps, processing this. "I never thought of it that way," he finally said. Dad was always the one who stayed in touch, who organized family gatherings. When he was gone, I guess none of us stepped up to fill that role, including me." "Including me," I added. I could have reached out more, insisted on being included. Instead, I retreated into my routines, my small world. It was easier than acknowledging how things had changed. We walked in silence for a moment, watching a pair of ducks glide across the lake's surface. "I'm sorry about Pinecrest," Andrew said abruptly. "It was the wrong approach. We should have talked to you first. Really talked, not just informed you of decisions we'd already made." The apology, unexpected and unqualified, brought a lump to my throat. "Thank you," I managed. "That means a lot to me." "Michael still doesn't see it that way," he warned. "He's convinced we were doing the right thing, that you're the one who overreacted. Andrew hesitated, searching for the right word. "Stubborn," I supplied with a small smile. "Like his father. Like me too, I suppose." Andrew nodded, a ghost of an answering smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "It's a family trait." We completed our circuit of the lake, returning to my apartment as the afternoon light began to soften toward evening. The children were noticeably more relaxed now, the initial awkwardness of the visit having dissipated during our walk. Even Tyler had dropped his defensive posture, engaging me in a surprisingly thoughtful conversation about the photography class he was taking at school. As they prepared to leave, I hugged each grandchild tightly, lingering over Zoe, who still seemed the most distressed by the separation. "You can come visit me anytime," I told her, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "And when I'm more settled, maybe you could even spend the night sometimes. There's a sofa bed in the living room." Her face lit up at this prospect. "Can I, Daddy? Can I have sleepovers with Grandma?" Andrew nodded, his expression softening as he looked at his daughter. "I think that could be arranged." Once Grandma has everything she needs for hosting. Guests. I'd like that very much, I said, exchanging a look of cautious understanding with my son. After they left, I sat on my small balcony watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of pink and gold. The visit had gone better than I'd dared to hope. Not perfect. Michael's absence was a painful reminder of the bridges still in need of repair, but a step in the right direction. My phone chimed with a text message. Eleanor. How did it go with the family? Better than expected, I wrote back. Andrew seems to be coming around. The grandchildren are adjusting. Still no word. From Michael, though. Her response was quick. Give him time. Stubbornness runs in your family, remember. See you tomorrow for Tai Chi by the lake. I smiled, setting the phone aside. Eleanor was right. Time was what we all needed. Time for anger to cool, for hurt to heal, for new patterns to establish themselves in place of the old. The next morning, I woke to rain pattering against my windows, a gentle spring shower that left the world outside looking washed clean and new. I made coffee and settled in my reading chair with a novel, enjoying the luxury of an unstructured day stretching before me. The knock, when it came around 11, was so unexpected that I thought I'd imagined it. I wasn't expecting visitors. Eleanor was at her grandson's baseball game, and Andrew had given no indication of planning another visit so soon. When I opened the door, Michael stood in the hallway, hands shoved deep in his pockets, expression unreadable. He was alone, no sign of Diane or the children. Michael, I said, unable to keep the surprise from my voice. I wasn't expecting you. Can I come in? He asked stiffly. I stepped back, gesturing him inside. Of course. Would you like coffee? I just made a fresh pot. He shook his head, moving past me into the apartment. Like the others before him, he took in the space with a quick, assessing glance. The sparse furnishings, the view of the rain-misted lake, the general sense of a life in transition. Andrew told me you apologized to the kids, he said without preamble, turning to face me. He said you acknowledged that what you did was unfair to them. It was, I agreed. They didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of an adult conflict. I regret the impact my actions had on them. He nodded, his expression still guarded. Diane thinks I should hear you out. Get your side of the story. So, he gestured vaguely. I'm here. Talk. It wasn't the most gracious invitation to dialogue I'd ever received, but coming from Michael in his current state of anger, it was significant. I motioned toward the small sitting area. Would you sit, please? This may take a while. He complied reluctantly, perching on the edge of the armchair while I took the sofa opposite. I took a breath, organizing my thoughts. This might be my only chance to help Michael understand my perspective, and I didn't want to waste it on recriminations or defensiveness. After your father died, I began, I felt increasingly irrelevant. Not to you individually, but to all of you collectively. The rhythm of our family changed. Holiday gatherings became shorter, phone calls less frequent. I told myself it was natural. You all had busy lives, families of your own. But gradually, I felt myself becoming more of an obligation than a participant in the family. Michael frowned but didn't interrupt. When you first brought up Pinecrest, it felt like the final step in that progression. Not just peripheral, but actually removed from the family circle entirely. Placed somewhere convenient, visited when schedules allowed, but no longer integrated into the daily fabric of your lives. That's not fair, Michael said, his voice tight. We were worried about you. The house was becoming too much to maintain. You were showing signs of cognitive decline. I wasn't, I interjected firmly. The medical assessment confirmed that. What you saw as cognitive decline was more likely depression, Michael. Loneliness. A sense of purposelessness after losing the roles that had defined me for decades. He blinked, clearly not having considered this interpretation. Even so, the house was challenging to maintain, I acknowledged. But there were other solutions we could have explored together if you'd approached me as a partner, in the decision-making process rather than as someone to be managed. Like what? He challenged. What solution would have addressed the practical realities of a 68-year-old widow living alone in a house that needed major repairs on a fixed income? I could have taken in a boarder to help with expenses. I could have downsized to a smaller house or a condo, but remained in the community I knew. I could have explored senior co-housing options. There were many possibilities, Michael, none of which involved being deposited in an institution while my family went on vacation. He flinched at the sharpness in my tone, and I regretted letting my lingering hurt show through. This wasn't about scoring points or making him feel guilty. It was about helping him understand. What I needed, I continued more gently, was to be treated as a person capable of participating in decisions about my own life, to have my preferences respected, my autonomy preserved. Instead, I felt steamrolled by a process that was presented as fait accompli. Pinecrest had already been researched, a deposit paid, a room secured, all without my input or consent. "So you sold the house out from under us," Michael said, but the anger in his voice had diminished, replaced by something closer to bewilderment. "Do you have any idea what that did to us? To the kids?" Zoe had nightmares for days. Tyler went completely silent, wouldn't talk to anyone. And Jacob packed a backpack and tried to walk back to the old house because he left his rock collection in the garage. Guilt washed over me anew at these details. "I never meant to hurt the children," I said softly. "That's the part I regret most deeply. They were innocent in all this." "Not just the children," Michael said. "All of us. Do you know what it feels like to return from vacation to find strangers living in your childhood home? To realize your own mother sold your history, your memories, without even a warning. About the same as it feels to be informed that you're being placed in a nursing home because your children have decided you're no longer capable of independence," I replied. Quietly. Devastating. Disorienting. A profound loss of control over the most basic aspects of your life. He stared at me, the parallel clearly striking home in a way it hadn't before. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound, the gentle patter of rain against the windows and the distant call of a loon on the lake. "I never thought of it that way," Michael finally said, his voice subdued. "To us, Pinecrest was a solution to a problem. To you, it was..." "What? A prison sentence?" "An erasure," I corrected. "A statement that who I was, my preferences, my autonomy, my very selfhood, no longer mattered as much as the convenience of having me safely contained somewhere that wouldn't disrupt anyone else's life." Michael ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of Howard when he was processing difficult information that it made my heart ache. "That wasn't our intention," he said slowly. "We genuinely thought we were doing what was best. For you." "I believe that," I said. "I never doubted your good intentions, Michael. But good intentions aren't enough when they're not accompanied by genuine listening, by real respect for the other person's agency." He nodded slowly, the first sign that my words were truly penetrating the armor of his anger. "We handled it badly," he admitted. "We should have talked to you first, explored options together instead of presenting Pinecrest as a done deal." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was an acknowledgement, the first step toward potential reconciliation. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "It still doesn't justify what you did," he added quickly, the edge returning to his voice. "The way you did it, while we were away, unable to stop it." "I know," I interrupted gently. "The method was extreme, perhaps even cruel in its execution. I won't defend that part, Michael. All I can say is that I felt cornered, desperate, and this was the only way I could see to regain control of my life." He looked away, his profile etched against the window, so like his father's that for a moment I saw Howard sitting there, wrestling with a difficult truth. "Where do we go from here?" he asked finally, meeting my gaze again. "What happens now?" It was the question I'd been asking myself since the moment I decided to sell the house. What came after such a dramatic rupture? How did we rebuild relationships, fundamentally altered by my actions and their reactions? "I don't know exactly," I admitted. "But I think it starts with this, with talking, really talking to each other. With acknowledging hurts on both sides without keeping score. With finding a new way to be family that respects everyone's autonomy and needs." Michael nodded, a slight relaxation in his posture suggesting that my words had reached him. "The kids miss you," he said, shifting the conversation to safer ground. "Especially Katie. She keeps asking when she can see Grandma." "I'd love to see them," I said, hope flickering in my chest. "Anytime, here or elsewhere if that's more comfortable, for everyone." "Maybe next weekend," he said cautiously. "Diane has a book club on Saturday afternoons. I could bring the kids while she's there." It was a small concession. His wife still wasn't ready to see me, but it was progress nonetheless. "I'd like that very much," I said. He stood, clearly having reached the limit of emotional openness he could manage in one conversation. "I should go. Diane's waiting in the car." The fact that she'd come with him but chosen to remain outside spoke volumes about the state of our relationship. Still, it was more than I'd expected a week ago when the rift had seemed unbridgeable. At the door, Michael paused, turning back to face me. "I'm still angry," he said frankly. "I don't know when I won't be." "I understand," I said. "Anger takes time to process, especially when it's tangled up with hurt and betrayal. I'm not asking you to pretend everything is fine. I'm just asking for the chance to rebuild what I damaged." He nodded once, a curt acknowledgement of my words. "Take care, Mom," he said. And then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him. I returned to the window, watching as he crossed the parking lot to where Diane waited in their car. I couldn't see her expression through the rain-streaked windshield, but I imagined it matched Michael's, a complex mixture of lingering anger, reluctant understanding, and the first tentative steps toward possible reconciliation. It was progress, however small. A crack in the wall of estrangement I had helped to build through my desperate actions. Not forgiveness? Not yet. But the beginning of a path that might eventually lead there. Later that afternoon, I called Eleanor to share the news of Michael's unexpected visit. "He actually listened," I told her, still somewhat amazed by the fact. "Really listened, maybe for the first time since this all began." "It's a start," she agreed. "Not a fairy tale ending, but a start." "I don't expect a fairy tale," I said. "I just want my family back, in whatever new form that takes. And for the first time, I think it might be possible." "Of course it's possible," Eleanor said with the confidence of someone who had weathered her own family storms. "Love is remarkably resilient, Martha, even when it's been stretched and strained almost to breaking." After we hung up, I sat on my balcony watching the rain taper off, giving way to watery sunshine that made the drops on the railings sparkle like tiny prisms. Eleanor was right about love's resilience. I had seen it throughout my life, in marriages tested by hardship, in friendships that survived betrayal, in parent-child relationships that endured despite profound disagreements and disappointments. The path forward wouldn't be easy or straightforward. There would be setbacks, moments when old hurts resurfaced, when anger flared anew. But there would also be healing, gradual and incremental, built on small moments of connection. A visit with grandchildren, an honest conversation, the slow rebuilding of trust that had been damaged but not destroyed. And through it all, I would continue building this new life I had claimed for myself, not in opposition to my family, but alongside my relationships with them. A life defined by my choices rather than by others' convenience. A life where I was author rather than character, agent rather than object. The lake before me rippled with light as the sun broke fully through the clouds, turning the water to hammered silver. New beginnings, I reflected, rarely came without painful endings. The path I had chosen had exacted a high price, one I was still paying in strained relationships and lingering guilt. But sitting here in this place of my own choosing, I couldn't bring myself to regret the core of what I'd done. I had refused to be sidelined in my own life. I had insisted on my right to self-determination, however imperfectly expressed. And in doing so, I had opened the door to a new kind of relationship with my children, one based on mutual respect, rather than assumed authority. It would take time to fully realize that potential, to heal the wounds my methods had inflicted. But for the first time since this all began, I believed it was possible. My phone chimed with a text message from Andrew. "Kids are asking if they can bring board games next visit. Zoe says you need to practice Candyland because she's going to crush you, Grandma." "Saturday afternoon okay?" I smiled, typing my reply. "Saturday is perfect. Tell Zoe I'm already practicing. Can't wait to see you all." Setting the phone aside, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Not the peace of problems resolved or conflicts concluded. We were far from that point. But the quieter peace of knowing that whatever happened next, I would face it on my own terms, in my own space, as the person I was choosing to become rather than the person others expected me to be. For today, that was enough. 3 months later, I stood in my kitchen preparing dinner for 8, my 2 sons, their wives, and all 4 grandchildren. It was the first time in over a year that our entire family would be gathered in one place, and the first time ever that they would all be guests in my home. The irony wasn't lost on me. For decades, I had been the hostess, opening the doors of the family home to welcome everyone inside. Now, in this small apartment overlooking Lake Harmony, I was claiming that role again, not as the keeper of someone else's house, but as the mistress of my own domain. "Grandma, can I help set the table?" Zoe asked, bouncing into the kitchen with characteristic enthusiasm. She had arrived early with Andrew and Lisa, ostensibly to help with preparations, but really because she had become my most frequent visitor over the past months, sometimes staying overnight on weekends, treating my apartment like a second home. "That would be wonderful, sweetheart," I said, wiping my hands on the apron Eleanor had embroidered for me as a housewarming gift. "World's best new beginning," stitched in cheerful yellow thread. "The good plates are in the cabinet over there." As Zoe carefully arranged my grandmother's china, the only truly valuable thing I had salvaged from the house sale, I reflected on how much had changed since that desperate day when I'd called the realtor from Pinecrest. The apartment that had once felt sparse and temporary now bloomed with life and personality. Watercolor paintings I'd created in the community art classes hung on the walls. Photographs of grandchildren smiled from every surface. Plants thrived on windowsills, and books filled shelves I'd finally had time to organize properly. But the most significant transformation wasn't in my living space. It was in my relationships. What had seemed irreparably broken 3 months ago had slowly, carefully been rewoven into something new and perhaps stronger. "Tyler's coming, right?" Zoe asked, interrupting my reverie. "He promised to teach me that card trick." "Yes, everyone's coming," I assured her, though I still felt a flutter of nervous anticipation. This dinner was Michael's idea, a formal gathering to establish new family traditions, as he'd put it in his carefully worded invitation. It was his way of acknowledging that our family dynamics had fundamentally shifted, that the old patterns were gone, and new ones needed to be consciously created. The reconciliation hadn't been quick or easy. There had been setbacks, moments when old resentments flared, when Michael's wounded pride clashed with my newfound assertiveness, when the children's confusion about the changes spilled over into tears or acting out. But gradually, through patient conversation and small gestures of goodwill, we had begun to rebuild trust. The turning point had come 6 weeks ago, when Tyler was hospitalized with appendicitis. I had rushed to the medical center as soon as Lisa called, sitting vigil with the family through the night. At one point, Michael and I found ourselves alone in the hospital cafeteria at 3 a.m, sharing stale coffee and exhausted worry. "I'm glad you're here," he had said quietly, staring into his cup. "Tyler was asking for you before they took him into surgery." "Of course I'm here," I had replied. "He's my grandson. This family may have changed shape, but it hasn't broken apart." Something in his expression had shifted then, a wall coming down, a recognition that whatever our disagreements, we were still bound by something stronger than property deeds or hurt feelings. Now, as I checked the roast in the oven and adjusted seasoning in the sauce, I could hear voices in the hallway outside my apartment. Andrew's laugh, Diane's voice asking Jacob if he'd washed his hands, the thunder of teenage feet on stairs. My family was arriving. Michael appeared first, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing an expression I couldn't quite read, nervous, hopeful, still slightly guarded. Behind him came Diane, who had been the slowest to warm to our new arrangement, but had finally begun including me in birthday party invitations and school event notifications. "Mom?" Michael said, leaning in to kiss my cheek, a gesture that had been absent for months and felt precious for its return. "Everything smells incredible." "Your grandmother's pot roast recipe," I said, accepting the wine with a smile. "Some traditions are worth preserving." Katie and Tyler followed their parents inside, Katie immediately gravitating toward the art supplies I kept on a side table for visiting grandchildren, Tyler attempting his usual teenage nonchalance, but failing to hide his genuine affection as he hugged me hello. "Grandma, I got an A on that history report you helped me with," he announced, pride breaking through his studied cool. "Mr. Henderson said my analysis of primary sources was sophisticated." "That's wonderful," I said, beaming at him. All those hours we spent in the Lakeside Village Library researching Civil War letters paid off. As the evening unfolded, I found myself marveling at how natural it all felt. Not like the old family dinners, which had often carried an undercurrent of obligation and performed harmony, but something new, more honest, more intentional. Conversations flowed across generational lines as the children shared school adventures and the adults discussed work challenges and community involvement. "I signed up to volunteer at the Literacy Center," I mentioned as we cleared the dinner dishes. "They need tutors for adult learners, and I thought my library experience might be useful." "That's great, Mom," Andrew said, and I could hear genuine enthusiasm in his voice. "You always were good at explaining things in ways people could understand." "Speaking of the library," Lisa added, "they're looking for someone to coordinate their senior book discussion group. You'd be perfect for that." It was a small moment, but significant. My family not just tolerating my independent choices, but actively supporting them, seeing my new life as an expansion rather than a retreat. After dinner, as the children settled in the living room for Tyler's promised magic show, Michael approached me in the kitchen where I was loading the dishwasher. "This was good," he said simply. "Having everyone here, it feels right." "It does," I agreed, touched by his admission. Different from before, but right in its own way. He nodded, then hesitated before speaking again. "I've been thinking about what you said, about feeling irrelevant to our lives. I want you to know that wasn't true. Is not true. You've always mattered to us, even when we did a poor job of showing it." The words, simple as they were, carried weight I hadn't realized I needed to hear. "Thank you for saying that," I said softly. "And Michael? I know selling the house hurt you deeply. I know it felt like a betrayal. I'm truly sorry for that." "We both could have handled things better," he acknowledged. "But maybe this is where we needed to end up. You seem happy here, more yourself than you've been in years." Looking around my kitchen, small but perfectly organized, filled with the sense of a successful dinner party, humming with the voices of family. I realized he was right. "I am happy," I said, surprised by how easily the admission came. Not because of what I lost, but because of what I found. Myself, I think. The person I was before I became defined entirely by what I did for others. Our conversation was interrupted by Zoe's delighted squeal from the living room as Tyler successfully made a coin disappear and reappear behind her ear. We joined the others, and I settled into my favorite chair, Howard's old reading chair. One of the few pieces I'd kept from our shared life, watching my grandchildren's faces light up with wonder and amusement. Later, as the evening wound down and families began gathering coats and purses, Andrew pulled me aside. "We've been talking," he said, glancing toward Michael, who nodded encouragingly. "About holidays. Thanksgiving's coming up, and we thought, would you like to host it here? We could set up tables on the community room downstairs if your apartment's too small." The invitation caught me off guard. For decades, I had hosted every major holiday, taking pride in bringing the family together around my table. After the house sale, I had assumed that tradition was lost forever. "Are you sure?" I asked. "It won't be the same as the big dining room and kitchen at the old house." "We don't want it to be the same," Diane said, speaking up from across the room. "We want it to be new. Something we create together instead of something we inherited." As they left that night, each family group departing with hugs and promises to call soon, I stood in my doorway watching them disappear down the hallway. The apartment behind me was pleasantly disheveled from the evening's gathering. Glasses still on side tables, chair cushions askew, the lingering warmth of voices and laughter. I closed the door and began the peaceful ritual of putting things back in order, but there was no urgency to it. These were good messes, the kind that came from life being lived fully and joyfully. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. "How did the family dinner go? Did Michael behave himself?" "Better than I dared hope," I replied. "We're hosting Thanksgiving here. All of us together, but in this new space, on these new terms." Her response came quickly. "Howard would be proud of you. You've built something beautiful from the ashes." The mention of Howard brought a familiar ache, but it was gentler now, mixed with gratitude rather than sharp with loss. He would have been proud, I thought. Not of the dramatic way I'd reclaimed my independence, that would have distressed his peacekeeping nature, but of the outcome. Of the woman I was becoming, the life I was building, the relationships I was nurturing on terms of mutual respect rather than assumed obligation. I made myself a cup of tea and stepped onto my small balcony, settling into the chair I'd positioned there for exactly this purpose: evening reflection over the peaceful waters of Lake Harmony. The community was quiet now, other residents having settled in for the night, but I could see lights in windows, evidence of lives being lived according to personal rhythms and choices. 3 months ago, I had sat in this same spot feeling uncertain about everything. Whether I'd made the right choice, whether my family would ever forgive me, whether I could actually build a meaningful life in this new place. Tonight, those questions felt answered, not with perfect certainty, but with quiet confidence. I had created something here. Not just a living space, but a life. Not just independence, but connection. To this community, to new friends and interests, to my family, on terms that honored all of us. I had proven to myself and to my children that I was capable of making good decisions about my own life, that my judgment could be trusted, that my autonomy deserved respect. The lake reflected the lights from shore, creating a mirror image that shimmered with each small wave. Like my life, I thought, the original and its reflection existing simultaneously, similar but distinct, each beautiful in its own way. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities. The Literacy Center volunteers were expecting me for training. Zoe had a dance recital next weekend that I wouldn't miss. Thanksgiving would require planning and preparation. But tonight, Sitting in my chosen space surrounded by evidence of my chosen life, I felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with anyone else's approval or disapproval. I had sold their house, and in doing so, had bought back myself. Not the woman I had been decades ago, but the woman I was becoming, shaped by all my experiences, strengthened by loss and conflict, enriched by the love that had survived even when I'd thought it lost forever. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.